What's going on, everybody? I'm gonna get really quickly into it, okay? Today we have an awesome episode. I, of course, as you all know, am not only technologically incompetent and just overall incapable of using technology. I also am really bad at scheduling stuff. So what did I do? I scheduled Three Arrows and Daniel, also known as Daniel, who is a really awesome history YouTube channel that I absolutely love. He runs the YouTube channel called Three Arrows, where he talks about history and debunks far-right talking points. I'm going to have him on right now. He's actually waiting on the line. And then after that, I was supposed to have Pac-Man on later today, but I just talked to David, and it's going to be better if we talk to him tomorrow at 4 p.m. rather than today at 4 p.m. So without further ado, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just gonna throw it to Daniel as well. What we're gonna be talking about today, with Daniel will be, and I'm gonna unmute you right now, Daniel, so you can start talking as well. Joining us all the way from Germany. Thank you, by the way, for coming in this late, and staying up this late for us so that you can deliver your perspective on what the hell is going on in the world. But we're going to be talking about right-wing radicalization, and what we're going to be talking about is how nationalists or like anti-immigration activists or advocates, I guess, are utilizing left-leaning economic populism and like pro-labor terminology to justify their white nativist immigration agenda. And this is something that I've been talking about for a very long time. You guys already know this. But yeah, I just wanted to bring in someone who is even more interested and is more knowledgeable, at least on the Nazi side, definitely, to give us his feedback on it. And then we're going to take a look at a Tucker Carlson video. So everyone get excited. It's a Tucker Carlson Prager University video. So yeah, what's up, Daniel?
Yeah, hey Hasan. Hey, Hasan's Twitch community. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited. This is actually my first appearance on any live stream that isn't my own. So
wow, what is it? Do you want to give us a little bit of a background information on what you do, like, or do you want to keep it as as secretive as possible? Because I don't know, you don't really show your face and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if I keep it mysterious, maybe more people will be interested. But there isn't much to say. Pretty much when it comes to my online persona. My YouTube channel is pretty new. I started out in the beginning of this year and was lucky enough that some bigger people gave me some shout outs, including you.
I mean, I'm not very big on YouTube. Don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously I'm at the Young Turks, which is pretty big on YouTube, but like, as far as my personal channel goes, you have a much larger, presence than I do, as far as your personal channel goes on YouTube. I got like 17,000 subs or something, and it's usually inundated with right-wing trolls. Honestly, that landscape is terrifying to me. Personal
you need to update that word filter.
Yeah,
but you're pretty huge on Instagram, though. I see.
Yeah, like all the outlets that have nothing to do with politics, I'm fairly good at, or I have a decent presence on, with the exception of Facebook, which that's probably my biggest and most viable platform, and that's because it's like an inherently very political platform, and there's like a lot of political organizing happening on Facebook, low key, that people are unaware of. And that's usually where all of the boomers are, for better or for worse. I'm talking to you guys, talking to you boomers right now on my Facebook Live, which my phone keeps fucking slipping over, but I'm going to turn the Facebook feed off in a second as well. Anyway, so yeah, so you're killing it. Your videos are awesome. One of my favorite ones specifically, if you guys are not familiar, you guys should go check out Three Arrows' YouTube page. It's called Three Arrows. One of my favorites is when you debunked the Steven Crowder socialism video where he incorrectly says, like, well, National Socialist, that meme, basically he like spread that out into an entire
video I ever done.
Yeah.
When Charlie Kirk said that in your debate, I was laughing very, I was laughing very
Yeah.
loud. How
I
did
mean,
you recover from that?
no, I mean, most people know that at this point. Like, most people are aware that it's a fucking meme and it's like a ridiculous point of view to have where it's like, okay, what were the Nazis known for? Was it the nationalism, or was it the national side of things, or was it healthcare? Like, what was their most popular policy? What was the most unifying, like, most popular policy out of Nazi Germany? So, I mean, that's like, literally, it takes like 3 seconds of consideration to figure out that, oh, wait, yeah, no, you're right, actually, that has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, nobody who looks at that topic honestly, I would say, and looks at it in its historical context can come to the conclusion that the Nazis were any kind of left-wing movement.
Yeah, especially when they murdered all of the left-wing people in their party. That
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
literally what the poem is about. The famous first they came for the socialists or the communists.
I know. I mean, there's just, it doesn't matter. Like, obviously, we know that right wingers all around the world will like argue out of both sides of their mouths about this sort of shit, and they'll use whatever they can to justify their inherently damaging perspective. But speaking of that, and actually, like, speaking of how Nazis rose to power, what I wanted to specifically ask you a little bit, and I briefly alluded to this earlier, was what your perspective is as far as in the Weimar Republic days, as the Nazi Party was securing power. If in your research, when you're making videos, if you noticed any sort of similarities, right, in fascist propaganda, in the way that I now believe a lot of right-wingers, a lot of like internet-facing right-wingers who are aware of the international white nationalist mobilization, like Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon and even Ann Coulter, if there were any similarities in the way they disseminate misinformation, specifically in regards to the perspective that they have as far as like how they feel about the labor movement. This is something that we hear a lot in the Twitch chat as well, where people constantly come in and they're like, well, what are you going to do about scabs? Like, you know, immigrants depress wages, and like, actually, illegal immigrants are scabs. You know, they're crossing the picket line. And this is something that's, you know, this is something that is inherently anti-socialist, because like socialism is also considered an international movement, I would say. And that like the like the international workers are international for a reason. Like, it's supposed to be this movement that liberates workers all around the world. But I just wanted to hear your perspective. That was the longest question ever. Sorry.
No problem. So yeah, just for your viewers, any kind of stuff I say, I'm not like an authority on the issue. There's like, in the video I did about it, there's a long reading list which you can go through. Regarding like these parallels from Nazi Germany to like modern right-wing movements, we always have to be like careful to not see parallels where there are none. That's always very tempting. But that said, I think like you just mentioned Steve Bannon. So these people never come out and like openly state what they believe or a specific policy that they want to be done usually. But if you stay with Steve Bannon, he like kind of makes like contents that show his bigotry about Jewish people, etc., etc. But I think what's like clear to everyone who's listened to him prior before he became part of the president's campaign and such, is that Steve Bannon really fucking hates Islam or Muslims. I mean, even to a point, I think when he was
yeah,
when he did his
sees
radio
it
show,
as the godless scourge that we're fighting now. In the past, it was communists, and before that, it was Nazis. He always regards it as like he always puts it into more like Judeo-Christian terminology, where it's like this holy conquest against the godless foes of the West, of Western civilization. And originally, it was the Nazis who were atheists, and then it was the communists who were atheists, and now our current ever-present danger threatening the Western civilized world is our Muslims, which are also godless for some reason, according to Steve Bannon. Either they have too much God or they're just completely godless. That's interchangeable. It doesn't matter. You're just trying to vilify who you perceive to be the enemy.
Yeah, exactly. I think that like when he talks about this, I think it's pretty like obvious how he sees a conflict between the Judeo-Christian West, or what he understands as that, and the Muslim world. He even goes as far to say that he thinks like, our forefathers did the right thing in combating Islam and keeping it out of the world. And like he often refers to stuff from ancient times. And it's obvious that he talks about like the Crusades or the breaking of the siege of Vienna and this sort of stuff as like the legacy of the West. And it seems like he sees this like as an eternal struggle almost between what he sees as the Muslim world versus what he sees as the Judeo-Christian world. And that's kind of that kind of parallels to how the Nazis saw their conflict with the Jews that later led to the war against the Soviet Union. From like, if you like thinking military strategically, that makes absolutely no sense. That they would invade the Soviet Union or that they would declare war on the US after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. But they saw like this entire military conflict and everything surrounding it as like their struggle of the Aryan race against like the Jewish race. Like that communism was a weapon of the Jews like destroy the Aryan way of life, etc., etc. And like a lot of like right wing or ultranationalist folks seem to kind of bank on that connection that they feel to like the people that fought against the Ottoman sieges in Vienna. We are somehow connected to them through the ethos of time, etc., etc. And when it comes to like the immigration policy that he talks about, when it comes to the Muslim world, he previously said that he wants zero influx from the Middle East. And when Donald Trump went on his radio program, he even disagreed with Donald Trump when he said we want to keep skilled people in the country. So it seems like the Tucker Carlson folks and the Steve Bannon folks, or maybe Ann Coulter to some degree, you mentioned her when we talked the last time.
Yeah,
they see the U.S. as this like this organic society, and that like immigrants coming from outside, specifically like Muslim immigrants, would make it somehow less American.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, and I think that inherently ties back to, I guess, obviously, like, white nationalism is drastically different. Regardless of its international appeal, white nationalism is drastically different in the way it's viewed in different countries. Like, Canadian white nationalism is rather different to, like, the United States' own form of white nationalism. And maybe I'm wrong, but, like, the ultimate goal is... because the concept of whiteness is ever expanding, right? Especially when you look at it from a historic framework where... obviously, the Irish or the Polish or Slavs in general or Jewish people, these people weren't under the category of white when they were the surge of immigrants coming into the United States. And as a matter of fact, they got very similar anti-immigrant sentiment to what the Mexicans or Latin Americans are experiencing right now, or even the Chinese to a degree. So, my perspective on it is that, like, ultimately it's just like the same shit with a different coat of polish on it. You know what I mean? Or like with a different coat of paint on it. And it has like some differences, but ultimately a lot of these people are separationists at heart. If you genuinely ask them what their perspective is, behind closed doors, they will tell you that this is. Their ultimate goal is a more homogeneous society, because they think that is how the West has always maintained itself as the best, which again is historically revisionist and all doesn't factor in like globalization, even as a consequence of trade and war and all this other stuff that I'm sure you're aware of, because you and I both learned history at a drastically different part of the planet. So it doesn't just exclusively feature American history.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I was saying, I think one of the elements that I'm really interested in now is like I said, kind of how Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon have been talking about like liberating a working class American. And when they say working class American, I feel like they're talking about a white working class American.
Yeah, of course.
So that is what I wanted to kind of hear your perspective on, as far as like if there are similarities between that kind of messaging, performatively adopting like leftist economic populism in an effort to justify a nationalistic perspective or white nativist
Hmm.
immigration policies.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how that kind of changed, right? Like the right in the US, like from Republicans, were usually always in favor of legal immigration, right? Because that's what their business interests were in favor of. Um, but if you talk about like the European far right, that's usually not been the case. Like this free market libertarianism, that's not as strong in Europe, especially when it comes to the right side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not sure. Like you're more familiar with U.S. domestic politics, but it seems like to me, you were just talking about parallels. Um, if you would like in the Weimar Republic, if the NSDAP would have come out and said, you may all have no job and the economy is completely fucked, but if you just work hard enough and pull up by your bootstraps, you can do it. So that may be, this is just conjecture, but it may be like a symptom of the downsides of capitalism becoming so obvious and so many people are affected by it that they have no other choice to shift their language to a slightly anti-business one.
Yeah, anti-corporatist, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's another thing that you and I are in agreement on that for sure. I think that like one of the things that I always mention about at least like right wingers, is that they understand messaging really well. They understand trends a lot better than these highly paid lanyard wearing neoliberal Democrats sitting in
definitely.
positions of power who refuse to acknowledge that there is a growing distaste for the elite. Obviously, America's historically never been like super class conscious, which is a serious hurdle to overcome. Obviously, as far as like pushing for any sort of left leaning economic populism, but it's gotten to such a point where like capitalism's faults or not even faults, like the inherently exploitative nature of capitalism has gotten to such a point where it's undeniable that people are suffering because of economic inequality,
Mm-hmm.
and these people on the right are aware of that, which is why even Charlie Kirk, for everyone in the chat who watched the debate, and also you as well, Daniel, you can attest to this, has adopted an anti-corporatist, like an ironically anti-corporatist approach to his like pro-corporate messaging. Where
Mm-hmm.
he will redefine capitalism and say like no, this is actually corporatism or crony capitalism, and it's drastically different than the worldview I suggest. There should be no
Mm-hmm.
regulation. But again, what's really remarkable there is that you don't necessarily hear that from Democrats as much here in America. But I guess the underlying thing here is that that both not both sides, but at least like Republicans are aware of that. It's really frustrating, and they're trying to utilize that to justify their like inherently damaging white nativist immigration agenda.
Mm-hmm.
S-
Yeah, it's very weird. Like the people who were in favor of capitalism in Weimar Germany kind of went a similar route. They didn't say we have to abolish capitalism now. It obviously failed. Nobody's getting work. People are starving in the street. It sucks. They kind of made this distinction that you just alluded to between like capitalism and corporatism. And in Germany, this one was called like that was schaffendes Kapital, was the German term, which was like this productive national form of capitalism. And then there was raffendes Kapital, which is kind of like greedy capitalism and was always like connected to like memorism of Great Britain and such. And then they put a spin on that of like outside forces kind of screwing up the economy in Germany, and how that went.
Yeah, and because they had more class consciousness, I feel like they kind of looked at the current economic like structure that they had and shifted all of the faults to Jewish people in general, while defending this like folkish German, right? Is that the proper term? Am I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like if you look at like pinning down what like Nazi ideology is really hard because you have to talk about a specific time period and also about specific people shaping it. But if we look like at the NSDAP party program, which is kind of their only like written version of what they want to do or how they think about certain topics, except from like Hitler's personal writings and stuff, just in terms of what the party wanted, they have like very, very aggressive anti-capitalist language in there. Like one point is specifically like, it's kind of hard to translate, but it says like breaking of the debt of the interest slavery, like something like that. Yeah, it's weird. What kind of confuses me with the people like Charlie Kirk or Tucker Carlson, they pretend to be like against the elites and against corporatism and such, but they also seemingly all support Donald Trump, which is really weird because Donald Trump is like the establishment president, if there ever was one.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump is still subservient to the same corporate masters as any other Republican would be. The only difference is that he has ramped up the culture war element, which is the only discernible and only populist element of right wingers, because like he's only ramped that up in its messaging, and is no longer trying to politely dog whistle, but straight up saying, like, murdering the euphemisms and straight up saying, like, Mexicans are rapists and drug dealers. There are Middle Easterners coming in this like Honduran caravan. This is an invasion. We need to send the military to the border. All this sort of stuff that really genuinely riles up, the right wing fan base, because there's no other, like, what could they be in support of? They can't be in support of the $50 tax break that they're getting. Ultimately, that's going to, that's what the Republicans actually genuinely care about. All this other shit is just a way to rile up the base of voters, right? So
yeah, exactly.
It is rather ironic that like these people are these people who have been like lifelong libertarians, right-wing libertarians. I'm using the American understanding of that. These guys who have been like right-wing libertarians and virtually like ANCAPs their entire lives are turning around and now talking about monopolies within these like social media companies exclusively from the framework of like that they're liberals, and they acknowledge corporate tyranny only when it comes to right-wingers being silenced or their perspectives being silenced on these platforms. Or because Jeff Bezos makes a lot of money, but their reaction is never, we should be in support of antitrust. It's more so we should have less regulation. But I guess Tucker is
no
different. Tucker actually does definitely have a different perspective on this than other people, which is why he's a tricky one to pin down exactly. Like I said, he's the only one outside of Steve Bannon that I've seen overtly use like identical language to the left, but never go so far as to provide solutions, but use the same terminology to call immigrants scabs and whatnot, and talk about how immigrants depress wages in an effort to stop the influx of immigrants that are coming into this country, while still also maintaining the violent militant language of like immigrants are invading this country.
Yeah, it's not like he like talks about this legitimate problem of people sucking up this huge amount of wealth that's completely out of proportion, and says this is like the proposed solution. It seems like more of a thing to make his audience hate liberals, or what he sells them as the elites in this country.
Yeah, well, liberals in the way they are just like liberals, from my perspective at least, like middle-class Americans who are Democrats or liberals, are just, they don't have class consciousness, so they don't understand that they probably they would be better off if they promoted more socialist principles, right? Maybe I'm completely off base here, but it's part of the reason why so many people just simply don't vote, is because either they're disenfranchised economically, they're too poor to vote, or because neither side actually represents their interests, so they have nothing to vote for. But I guess we've talked a little bit about the similarities within Nazi era propaganda, as far as like what kind of leftist language that the Nazis use. So let's just get into my favorite white nationalist, Tucker Carlson. Do you want to do that?
Oh, I'm not sure, but okay, let's go for it.
Wait,
Uh,
so let's take a look at like I said, the Tucker Carlson Prager University video I sent you last night about
mhm.
about immigration and
Yeah,
how like what happened to the left. I love that. I love Tucker, like the way he brings up things. He's like, what happened to the left? I mean,
yeah. In
they
combination with that face, it's like,
yeah. They're just like performatively acting as though he cares. He's like, "What? These guys used to be so they used to be so smart." they
yeah,
yeah, when they hated immigrants just like we did. And now,
yeah. Bill Clinton was such a good leftist. I don't know
yeah.
what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, hold on. I'm going to do a screen share with you as well. I'm having somewhat of a hard time here.
Take your time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I skimmed through it for about I think I did like half an hour to an hour, and chucked down some notes. And yeah, it's quite like it's so clever what they're doing. Like they give you like these bits of pieces of information and construct this entire narrative, so that it seems like they make complete sense, while it's actually really just it's like full on demagoguery. And I can't believe that Tucker Carlson actually believes what he is saying here.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that Tucker Carlson believes what he's saying. I think what he believes is there are certain elements of the video, and we'll get to it in a second, but I think there are certain things within the video that he definitely agrees to, especially the violent stuff. But
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I meant just in a way that I think Tucker Carlson. It seems like he has like completely understood that it's way more about you can whip people up way more with emotions than and constructing like a narrative that serves your interest instead of presenting them facts that might lead to the position that you're at.
yeah. All right, well, let's get started then. Without further ado, I bring to you another Prager University special. Tucker Carlson, Illegal Immigration, It's About Power.
I recently watched a group of protesters, most of them young, denouncing President Donald Trump's immigration policies. They were waving Mexican flags and shouting, "Si se puede!" Yes, we can. This is now the rallying cry of the open borders left, but it wasn't always.
So before we even get into this, let me tell you real quick, that never happened. Okay, I love when right wingers just make up fucking stories. Like, do you really
I
think
watched
that?
this protest.
Yeah. Do you really think that Tucker Carlson, who goes everywhere with a massive security detail because of his political perspective, do you really think that Tucker Carlson was near a group of protesters who were protesting in Spanish? I fucking don't think so. I think that's an absolute lie. Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the subtle linkage of yes we can to open borders and yes we can to Si Puede, which is
open borders left. Like, who is that? I mean, is some sort of the DSA actually wants like full movement? But that's in no way representative of like the mainstream left in the U.S.
No, of course not. I mean, like even I acknowledge that there's always going to be certain restrictions and limitations on freedom of travel, right? Like I would probably be as open borders as possible in an ideal world. I do believe in open borders and freedom to travel, freedom to move, but there still be restrictions on it. But the hilarity here is that like people on the left look at me like I'm a fucking psychopath when I say shit like that. You know what I mean? Just like people on the right look at like Cato Institute libertarians as psychopaths when they advocate for the same thing. But yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I wondered if a single person at the protest knew where it came from. The slogan first became famous 50 years ago, thanks to Cesar Chavez. He was the founder of the United Farm Workers Union. When Chavez said, "Si se puede," he meant something very different. Yes, we can seal the borders. Cesar Chavez hated illegal immigration.
Stop real quick, please. So, do you want to take this? Should I take this one?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so this si se puede, meaning we should close the borders, that is an outright lie. There's not a grain of truth in there. I looked at the United Farm Workers website where they actually have like an explanation how it came to be and what it means. And it wasn't like Cesar Chavez didn't coin the term. It was actually someone different. And the context was that in 1972, there was a governor in Arizona who was going to sign a bill forbidding farm workers to boycott during harvesting season. And of course, there was a lot of opposition to that by the United Farm Workers. And when they asked this governor about it, he said, when it comes to those people, to me, they really don't exist. And he signed that bill within an hour. And as a reaction to that, Chavez went into a 25-day water-only fast and really committed to that. And during this struggle that he went through in reaction to this law, people were coming to him saying, you know, this is pointless. The growers have way too much power, way too much influence on politics. There's really no point in you doing this. And the co-founder of the United Farm Workers, Dolores Huerta, I think is her name. She actually coined the term and saying, "Si se puede, yes, we can oppose these people if we just commit to it." That's the origin of the term. It doesn't refer to closing borders.
You mean to tell me that Cesar Chavez was his main like. Or this main like rallying cry wasn't about closing the borders? So strange that Tucker Carlson would just completely take this out of context. But let's see what.
I mean, it goes even further.
He was Hispanic, obviously, and definitely on the left. But he fought to keep illegal Mexican immigrants.
Still there? Well, I think your mic went mute, or my speakers.
Now?
Okay.
Oh yeah, my microphone went mute for a second. Sorry guys, I moved it a little bit and then my microphone went mute. Apologies. Okay. Anyway, but yeah, no, I was just laughing at Tucker Carlson saying Cesar Chavez was Hispanic. Obviously, it's like, dude, his discontent is so straight. Like
we have another immigrant on our side. It's our new Dave Rubin for us.
Republicans love token immigrants. Anyway, let's keep going.
But he fought to keep illegal Mexican immigrants out of this country. He understood that peasants from Latin America will always work for less than Americans will. That's why employers prefer them. Chavez knew that. As long as we have a poor country bordering California, he once explained, it's going to be very difficult to win strikes.
So here's a really interesting perspective that Tucker Carlson fails to mention here, okay? And this is something that relates back to what I talked about today on my video where I specifically was talking about like birthright citizenship and whatnot, and like how Donald Trump is genuinely pushing for a white ethno-state, and how it pertains to the way we have regarded who is allowed to be a citizen in this country, and what material reasons or what reasons of capital are associated with citizenship and the legality of people from different ethnic backgrounds. And I believe it was in the 60s, in 1965, in the aftermath of the Civil Rights Movement, where we genuinely started restricting immigration coming in from Mexico. We used to regard them as Mexican migrant workers, and we allowed them to, like I said, we allowed them free travel for the most part. And even before that, obviously, if we're talking about like 14th Amendment days, obviously there was never even a conversation about whether or not Mexicans had free travel into the country, because half the fucking southern states were already Mexico. And that's like I'm using like layman terms to describe this, but so there was always been a reason to depress wages. So the irony here is that no matter what Tucker Carlson says, or no matter what he is using as far as like the way he's misusing Cesar Chavez's perspective, it doesn't matter. In the end of the day, if you want to make sure that immigrants are no longer depressing wages, the quickest way to do that is to legalize them and allow them to participate in the labor force in a meaningful way, similar to what the white working class or the diverse working class of American citizens are in this country currently. The question is, who's depressing wages more? Is it our current capitalist structure that thinks profit isn't stolen wages, or is it Mexican immigrants that are coming in to the country?
It's really like this point again that Tucker Carlson kind of makes it look like this Cesar Chavez would have been like in line with what Donald Trump is doing, like limiting illegal immigration because they undercut the wages of local workers. That's actually not true, though. Cesar Chavez wasn't opposed to, of what I could gather. His biographer wrote an entire piece about it. He had no problem with illegal immigration or people coming from Mexico who didn't have U.S. citizenship. He even wrote an op-ed in 1974 in the San Francisco Examiner talking about how they oppose mass deportation and they want amnesty and they want lower hurdles for people to gain citizenship.
Yes. He pushed for naturalization like frequently as an activist.
Yeah, what he was against was like people breaking the strike and like undercutting the bargaining power of their union.
Exactly.
Yeah, and this is why he this is like people have been trying to hijack this Cesar Chavez was against illegal immigrants thing since his death, pretty much. And there are numerous videos online about how the co-founder Dolores, who I mentioned her earlier, talks about this and says this is complete nonsense. And we were against strikebreakers. That was what we were about. Even when, like, the godfather of Cesar Chavez broke a strike once, and he never talked to him again, except on his deathbed when the godfather begged him for forgiveness. What's also kind of left out is that at the time that Cesar Chavez was alive and was an activist, as you just said, like the U.S.-Mexican border was a lot less secured. Specifically before like Bill Clinton came in and signed the the Illegal Immigration Reform and Illegal Immigrant Responsibility Act and all this sort of stuff. So their problem was that they would go on a strike against the grower lobby or a boycott or something, and then the grower lobby would just count on people to come over the border. So they kind of exploited these illegal immigrants so they wouldn't have to pay the local workers a living wage. It had nothing to do with him opposing illegal immigration as a whole.
Yeah, and he also explains his position later in that in a letter to the editor in the San Francisco Examiner in the year 1974, when he says the illegal aliens are doubly exploited, first because they are farm workers, and second because they are powerless to defend their own interests. But if there were no illegals being used to break our strikes, we would win those strikes overnight and then be in a position to improve the living and working conditions of all farm workers, and not necessarily people that are like his understanding was that, and this is part of the reason why I mentioned it earlier, that like these sort of worker movements are usually regarded as an international worker movement because if you can't improve the working conditions of workers in other countries, then you are creating an environment where the competition is unsustainable, and that could lead to your wages being depressed. But currently, we don't even have that problem in this country. That's like technically would be considered a good problem to have because we haven't even gotten to that point yet. We're not paying living wages to our workers,
exactly,
regardless of whether immigration is happening or not.
Yeah. So as you just said, he really it's not like he hated illegal immigrants. He really felt for them. Especially, he was like openly critical about U.S. policy so the growers would take these illegal immigrants and let them work and didn't call the authorities and anything. But if these illegal immigrants then went around and joined the union and started striking, they would just deport them. And he was very open about his opposition to that.
Yeah, and also I think another like a Los Angeles union official at the time correctly pointed out that Mexican Americans who continued to support restrictive immigration policies should realize that they would not be here if their fathers had not been illegal aliens. So that's the whole that's the idea behind it, regardless of what your perspective is. In the end of the day. So yeah, but let's keep going.
In 1969, Chavez led a march down the center of California to protest the hiring of illegal immigrant produce pickers. Marching alongside him was Democratic Senator Walter Mondale and the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, the longtime aide to Martin Luther King. 10 years later, Chavez dispatched armed.
Do you know the details of that march? I didn't look into it at all, but I didn't look into that
I looked
one.
for it, but I couldn't find like the specific one because there was a lot of like civil rights activism going on at the time. That's like
Yeah.
the problem with PragerU. For anyone watching, if someone does like a video that's very heavily opinionated but doesn't list any sources, it's usually full of shit. But I highly doubt that this was about illegal immigration, period, and much more about not being able to unionize with illegal immigrants.
Yeah, exactly. The obvious irony there is, and this is something that conservatives love doing. They love to revise or whitewash like left-wing activists, or like progressive activists. Even Martin Luther King, for example, they love to revise and like totally steal their narrative to make it seem as though Martin Luther King was a conservative and he definitely didn't organize or intend to organize the Poor People's March. And you know what I mean? Like this sort of this
even
idea
George
that
Orwell
like
to some extent.
the idea that like MLK wasn't also building momentum around class consciousness or democratic socialism in the end, before he met before he was assassinated, is preposterous. Similar to what they're doing with Cesar Chavez here.
Yeah, it really sucks. Like they can bank on the fact that people have busy lives and they can't spend like their entire day reading up on this stuff, but they probably know like the quote, "We should judge people on the value of their character, not the color of their skin." And somehow like trying to vaguely connect this to the left for social justice advocacy based on skin color.
Yeah.
It's really, it's frustrating.
Yeah,
Right.
the Democrats are the real racists because they care about what color your skin is. Like, they hate white people. This sort of shit is so preposterous.
And then
Luckily,
the next
you can't
level,
do that about certain people like fucking Malcolm X and shit. But that doesn't matter. They already regard him as a terrorist anyway. So
and the next level of that is like not talking about like the party realignment and talking about how racist the Democrats were the 19th century.
Oh yeah, it's just so frustrating. The joke I have about that is like, Republicans have always been anti-empirical data, right? Like they've always been anti-empirical evidence, but now they want you to also miscount anecdotal evidence. Like they're literally telling people like, listen up, black people, don't mind the fact that we're the fucking racists. Don't mind the fact that we are the only ones who are making like police brutality an inherently like we're the only ones who don't want to reform police brutality in this country. We're the only ones who are wearing fucking the Confederate flag, but then also while we're going out to vote, but then also claiming that like we are the party of Abe Lincoln. So obviously, like, the last example we can give you of people being nice to black people is like fucking 150 years ago, but whatever. Just don't mind that. Just please vote for us for literally no reason. While we still try to maintain
the Democratic plantation.
Yeah, while we use like seriously racist language to describe certain things. Like that's the funny thing is that like a lot of times the shit that Candace Owens says like seems to me like a white person wrote it, because I can't see black people regarding like their current predicament as in such like slavery terms, in such like militant terms, like the Democratic plantation.
Yeah.
Anyway, but let's keep going.
Armed union members into the desert to assault Mexican nationals who were trying to sneak across the border. Chavez's men beat immigrants with chains and whips made of barbed wire. Illegal aliens who dared to work as scabs had their houses firebombed and their cars burned. Chavez wasn't embarrassed about any of this. He bragged about it. No matter. Chavez remains a progressive hero. President Obama declared his birthday a commemorative.
By the way, the hilarity here is that, like, I can't tell if Tucker thinks that those are good things or not. You know what I mean? Where he's like, he beat Mexicans, like, and to this day, like,
tough on immigration.
Yeah, he was just tough on immigration, and it's almost like he's saying, like, come on, that's just, why can't we do that? You like commemorating, you like honoring this person. Why can't you honor the things that he did?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
again, it wasn't about those people being illegal immigrants, but union busters.
Yeah, there's a long history of people trying to form unions beating the shit out of scabs. That doesn't mean that. I mean, I guess that the irony here is like this is Republican doublespeak and a perfect example of this. Like looking at, for example, left-wing violence, which is something that Ann Coulter brought up in the debate that we had, because all of her examples had to be fucking from like 200 years ago, or like 60 years ago. But she was like, well, the left has always historically been violent, and it's like using like the Haymarket riots or whatever to make it seem as though that's a bad thing, or to make it seem as though like the outcomes of that were overall bad. That wasn't like a hard fought battle against class traders or AKA the police force trying to ensure that the capitalist bidding was done. You know what I'm saying? Like, and using that to demonize like left-wing violence, even though you benefit from the outcomes of that to this day.
Yeah, I mean, as you just said, with Republicans being against evidence and data, like if you in virtually any Western country where I looked at the stats, be it Germany, France, the US, like right-wing violence currently exceeds like left-wing violence by a large margin. So they have no other choice than to go back to some riots for working conditions to claim, violence, something that has happened through humanity for thousands of years for a bunch of different reasons. That's actually like a symptom of the left in this country. Or like Charlie Cook in your debate when he was rattling down Mao's China, Stalin's Russia, etc., etc. Like they're just so out of bounds with like bringing something to the table that's actually based in any kinds of contemporary evidence.
Yeah, no, the examples they have to use are going to be from fucking 100 years ago, because there aren't contemporary examples, because the contemporary left is neutered to a fault almost, I would say. Or that's why that's why they try to create this false equivalency between like shit that Maxine Waters says, for example, things that she said like, hey, get in the faces of your legislators, like make sure they understand the consequences of their decisions, as though that is a call to violence, when Donald Trump is making literal calls to violence while also, demonizing the press and anyone who he has petty disagreements with. There's no equivalency between the two.
So insane. When I watched like the reaction on Fox News of when the Democratic candidates said, when they go low, we kick them.
That was Attorney General Eric Holder, who is one of the most neutered little bitches on the planet, who refused to prosecute Wall Street bankers. He was Obama era Attorney General. To use him as an example of someone who is violent or militant is doubly hilarious. But then they'll do the same thing now, or the anti-corporatist capitalists will turn around and say stuff like, well, Eric Holder didn't do a good job of like jailing these bankers. The fuck? That's my talking point, bitch. What do you mean? That's my perspective.
They also have no like problem turning around on like, if we stay with Fox News, and saying that the migrant caravan is like a hostile invasion force that needs to be combated with the military. That's like pretty much like an open call to violence.
Yeah. Fausta 83, that's not even close to what she said, man. She said to get a crowd, get in their face, and surround them in public and tell them they aren't welcome. Yeah, okay, what do you think that is? Do you think that's a call to violence, Fausta 86? That's not different than what I said. And that wasn't about that was about legislators. That wasn't about like random Trump supporters. Anyway.
Yeah, and like if you contrast that with like Trump literally saying he will pay for the legal fees if people like beat up people who heckle him.
Regardless. All right, let's keep going.
Federal holiday. It's an official day off in a half a dozen states. There's a college named after him and dozens of public schools.
Yeah, they named all of this stuff after him, not for all of the work that he did as far as like unionization or as far as like Latino rights, but they named all this after him because he beat the shit out of Mexican nationalists. Yeah, you're right, dude.
He would have been a Republican these days.
Yeah, no, he would have. Yeah, for sure. It's so stupid. Like, how can you lie like this? I guess it doesn't matter.
Cesar Chavez's life is a reminder of how much the left has changed and how quickly. Until recently, most Democrats agreed with Chavez. They opposed unchecked immigration.
This is what I mean. Most Democrats agree with Chavez on what? On what? On beating like Mexican people? Like the way you framed that argument? Point to one Democrat. Point to one Democrat that agrees with anything you just said. Point to one fucking Democrat. It's so crazy. Oh.
Hopefully we can make it to the end
because they knew it hurt American workers, and they were right. One study by
No, Democrats agree with Chavez to this day because of his perspective on unionization and the power of collective bargaining. Not because... Okay. Anyway, I mean, this is so disgusting. This is so...
I can't believe Tucker would lie to me like that.
I know. I would have never expected him to do this.
Harvard economist examined the effects of the mass migration of Cuban refugees to this country in 1980, the so-called Mariel boat lift. He found that American workers in Miami with a high school education saw their wages fall by more than 30% after the refugees arrived.
So let's just, I don't know what the, first of all, this is incredibly narrow framing, right? So obviously, like, because of how insanely narrow this framing is, this is completely inconsequential. There's you can't fucking point to causal links in here at all.
Yeah.
And also the amount of like Cuban migrants that were coming in is not even nowhere near the same amount with respect to the labor force of the entire U.S. economy.
Yeah. I looked up the study. And firstly, to say, like, this is like a typical thing of the right, like using the word immigrants and refugees like interchangeably. Like migrants specifically come to work. These people were fleeing an authoritarian regime, and as you said, it's like limited to Miami. And this study is from 1990, by the way, and it was re-examined last year in October by Borjas. Who said that it's probably true that this sudden arrival of refugees suppressed the wages up to 30%. But he criticized that the study at all didn't go into like the further labor market outcomes of these people who got their wages suppressed. They didn't look at if new positions were opening up in leading positions. And they also didn't say or didn't include that if you compare this to other cities with a similar situation with immigrants, this event in Miami, this kind of suppression of wages was extremely out of the order.
Yeah, that's what happens when you hyper focus on like one period of time rather than larger macroeconomic like shifts that are happening, right? That's the issue when you look at just a massive influx of refugees fleeing their country and coming into the United States in huge quantities. That like I don't know what the I don't know how many. I mean, we look at it quickly, like if I were to do quick math, which is terrifying, and I kind of don't want to do it, but if I were to look at like how many Cuban refugees came into Miami and multiply that to with respect to the entirety of like the Miami population across the United States population, the number of immigrants that are coming in would to the United States would be much greater. Also, the makeup of the immigrants are very different. Like there's so many.
Everything. Like,
well, the irony,
the labor pool is different.
The inherent irony there also is that those the Cubans that fled and came in and had amnesty by Americans are now, or had at least the opportunity to become like insanely Republican, like incredibly Republican.
Yeah, that's pretty. I think a lot of Cubans also don't like the Democrats because of the Bay of Pigs debacle.
Yeah, of course.
Kennedy pretty much screwed them up.
Bay of Pigs, the fact that they hate socialism, somewhat understandably, even though, people will get mad at me for that because they were all like the landowners and whatnot. So I obviously my disposition would be that don't understand their struggle, quote unquote, but I can see why they would be against the left across the board. But also because they got amnesty and they completely view themselves as like a different kind of immigrant. They usually have a supremacist attitude. At least, like, this is anecdotal, but like at least like the younger Cubans I've talked to, this is the way they talk about the older Cuban migrants that came into the country, or refugees that came into the country. Yeah, a lot of the landowners were also white passing because they're colonizers technically, or descendants of colonizers in Cuba.
Yeah, so this part in the video is like a pretty good like showcase how PragerU works, I think. Like they attempt to give you any kind of like study or data that you can look up, and they have to go back to a study from the 1990s, which has since been revised, and not the opposite direction, but with a lot more caveat to it. Like one more instance is like that Borja said, that the study from the 1990s didn't at all look like at immigration surplus, which could have been because of the effect on the wages was so high, 2 to 3 times as large as it usually is. So that may have actually been a good development for Miami, but of course PragerU doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
Believe in supply and demand, this is not surprising. After the fall of Saigon,
I love how simplistic that approach is, where it's like, oh, it's just supply and demand, dude. More immigrants coming in means depressed wages. Sorry, liberals, checkmate.
Yeah, but everyone understands that. You don't have to talk about immigration surplus or like changes in the labor pool and all this stuff. Everyone knows what supply and demand is.
Additional opportunities, additional output, more jobs opening up as a consequence of that. These are all things that we don't have to talk about. Let's just briefly glance over supply and demand and then move forward with it. Anyway, after the fall of Saigon, here we go.
In 1975, Democratic Governor Jerry Brown opposed letting Vietnamese refugees into California on the grounds that the state already had enough poor people. As he put it at the time.
Okay, so again, like I said, I didn't look into. Did you look into this at all? I didn't look into a lot of this stuff.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, the first thing you would have to say is that it's like an insanely scumbag thing to do, to go into a country, wage war, install a puppet government, and when you fuck up and the people who you're fighting with flee to your country, you tell them, no, sorry, we don't have any kind of space for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, we totally fucked up an entire country with illegal wars that we waged because we wanted to fucking end communism, or like we were waging ideological warfare across the world. And like, okay, fuck Jerry Brown. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what he said, but that doesn't mean that he represents my perspective just because he, in the past, like, that's the beauty of like the way people try to frame partisan politics, like the way the right always tries to frame partisan perspectives, where it's like, I don't care about what your personal views are, but I will mention other Democrats who have done different things. And they use this all the time, which is why I get so fucking frustrated with neoliberals or so frustrated with moderate Democrats, because as soon as you fucking give in, as soon as you cave, as soon as you say, all right, we're going to try to appeal to more moderate voters, we're going to look tough on crime, for example, they'll turn around and use that against you in the future, similar to the way that the Barack Obama era immigration policies were immediately used by Donald Trump to justify his insanely inhumane family separation and whatnot. He was like, well, Barack Obama did it too, silly liberals. You didn't have a problem with it then. No, we fucking did have a problem with it then. As a matter of fact, we talked about it all the fucking time, and we even got, Cenk at least, got kicked off of MSNBC. Not specifically for that, but because he was criticizing Barack Obama all the fucking time for this sort of shit. So I don't give a fuck what previous Democrats have done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I know what you mean. And this is again like leaving out some very like important information. As I said, I had like half an hour to an hour to look into all of this, and the study took much of that time. But what the problem of this Democratic governor, I think, how I understood it, was not that these refugees would come here because the U.S. has enough poor people, but that California was pretty much alone with these refugees, and there might have been even more coming after those 50,000. if refugees come, they don't like specifically come to work. They come because they run away. Of course, they can work, but they need to be incorporated into society. And he didn't want California to take all that amount of work alone. Interesting is though that you could make in a video in the exactly opposite direction, because there was a Republican senator from Washington. What's his name? It was Dan Evans, right? And he kind of had the thought, we kind of like fucked up this country and destroyed their crops with our chemical warfare. Let's take some of these in, and worked hard for redistribution of these immigrants in the Washington area. And
what happened to these Republicans?
Yeah, what happened to the Republicans? I don't know. Yeah, but like Vietnamese immigrants, or refugees, that's a success story in the U.S. That's the American dream, coming from nothing and becoming one of the most successful immigrant groups that the U.S. has.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to Republicans, man.
Yeah.
They used to be so
really strange that they were pro-immigration, and yet they've changed their perspective. They've lost sight of the American dream. Very strange.
They don't care about the worker anymore.
Yeah.
There's something a little strange about saying, let's bring in 500,000 more people when we can't take care of the 1 million Californians out of work. First-term Senator Joe Biden of Delaware agreed. He introduced federal...
oh, by the way, I fucking love when people bring up Joe Biden, because Joe Biden was like just such a classic fucking middle-of-the-ground Democrat who absolutely sucked hot shit and like plagiarized his speeches. It was like the laughingstock of the Democratic Party, and like the classic neoliberal who didn't do anything until like Barack Obama and his like best friendship with Barack Obama kind of like revitalized his career. Not only that, but he's also incredibly creepy, and like that creepiness reared his ugly head when we started like relitigating the Anita Hill stuff, when we were talking here in the United States about what was going on with Kavanaugh, and obviously that's like, again, like there are plenty of reasons why Joe Biden fucking sucks. So then to turn around and be like, well, Joe Biden was in agreement, and well, fuck Joe Biden. How about that? There you go.
They might run him though, don't they?
Oh no, I know. Well, that's another battle. I say this about a multitude of things. Like I always say this about like progressives living in Muslim nations. Like we have to fight our own oppressive governments, but then also like Western imperialism at the same time, and it greatly hurts our efforts. And it's the same as like progressives in America in a similar fashion, where we have to fight our own fucking democratic establishment who loves corporatism and absolutely will put like boring middle of the ground candidates who will never upend the status quo because they benefit from it. We have to fight that, and then we also have to fucking fight the vampires in the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, like from a European perspective, like this two-party system that you got running there, that's like, it's insane. It's so depressing to take a look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. We have a two-party system where both parties are right-wing from a worldwide perspective. It's really strange. Yeah. And they both actively hate like socialists or anyone to the left of them, so that's great. Anyway.
Legislation to curb the arrival of the Vietnamese. 2 decades later, leading Democrats were still wary of mass immigration, especially illegal immigration. As Bill Clinton put it in the 1995 State of the Union address, Americans are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country.
This is what really fucking pisses me off. This is why I think like neoliberalism is absolute fucking cancer, and it's just constantly like this sort of compromise politics with the other side that has no interest in compromising whatsoever is so self-defeating that they can instantly turn around and use this kind of messaging to be like, look, Democrats were in favor of this. Well, why the fuck were they in favor of this for a second? Like, if you want to consider that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like if you ask any like left person, like really left, not like Democratic establishment left, nobody likes Bill Clinton, and nobody thinks his like policies were great. Like, you would know this better than I. Like when Bill Clinton was around, there was like this huge obsession with like crime in inner cities, and crime caused by illegal immigrants, and it was virtually impossible to become like president as a Democrat and appearing like with rehabilitative methods when it comes to
And he passed so many damaging fucking policies, including the 3 strikes law. He called young black teenagers super predators, and Hillary Clinton justified that. Hillary Clinton called young black teenagers super predators to justify his husband's terrible approach to his anti-criminal justice reform approach. Like, these are all these are all terrible anti-progressive policies that the Democratic Party since the 90s has been actively trying to push for and pass in an effort to appeal to these moderate sensibilities of these moderate Democrats. Ultimately, all they're doing is as the right gets increasingly crazier with the fucking likes of the Tea Party and whatnot, all we're doing is pushing the Overton window comfortably into the right, which is where we're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, progressives today who are involved in social justice advocacy largely fight or try to mitigate the effects of Bill Clinton's policy when it comes to the criminal justice system, like you just said, 3 strikes, mandatory sentencing,
mandatory
and all
sentencing.
this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public services they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. No prominent Democrat would say anything like that today.
This is kind of like saying, Republicans and Democrats both were very racist in the past. You know what I mean? That was, yeah, I know. I get it. In the 90s, Bill Clinton's approach was incorrect, which is literally what we're trying to show the rest of the Democratic Party all the time. Maybe we should fucking sit down like Debbie Wasserman Schultz and even Tom Steyer, newer people in positions of, not positions of power, but newer people that have interest in running for the Democratic presidential ticket, and make them watch Prager University videos and be like, don't do any of this. Don't ever fucking try to appeal to the sensibilities of this reasonable conservative base. That's never going to happen. The rich people are always going to vote conservative because they fucking want tax cuts more than anything else, okay? They want tax cuts more than you want liberty. So they will do everything they possibly can to hoard as much wealth as they possibly can. And then the poor people only give a shit about the culture war. Or they only give a shit about this fake notion of patriotism that's instilled within Republican messaging and also even Democratic messaging in a post 9/11 era. So
yeah, it's about so much of current politics, specifically, or not specifically in the US, but because we're talking about it right now, is just about the identity of the voter, or of you and me, and not the issues at hand. And by the way, you have to help me out here. When Bill Clinton, or I assume Tucker Carlson has the same opinion, says that undocumented immigrants leech off the system because of the public services they use. What are they talking about? Roads or
no? So
the police force.
So that's a beautiful question that you asked. Well, the irony is they can't even utilize the police force. That's part of the reason why we have sanctuary cities, right? They can't use the fucking fire department or the police force out of fear that they will get persecuted and get deported. And also, yes, it's a fucking meme, as I pointed out to Ann Coulter, to turn around and be like, we have the largest welfare state. It's what the fuck are you talking about? We don't have a sizable welfare state per capita. It's ridiculous to even assume that. It's ridiculous to even point that out. Yes, we have a large welfare state in totality, given the fact that we have a lot of old people in this country and just a lot of people in general. But undocumented citizens don't actually fucking take anything from the welfare state in comparison to what naturalized citizens can. They can't benefit from anything with the exception of schools for their children, and that's one of the really damaging ways that they justify the current dynamic, the way that Donald Trump is talking about ending birthright citizenship and shit. They will usually throw around this number, $118 billion is the cost of illegal immigration to this country every year. That's not true. First of all, that doesn't include anything as far as the output, as far as their contributions to the welfare state, as far as their contributions to Social Security, which they cannot benefit from, okay? Secondly, that factors in their children who are U.S. citizens. Their children who were born here, that factors in like the schools that those children use and whatnot. And that is really fucking disgusting, if you ask me, because I think that if you were born here, obviously, as is the law of the land, you're an American citizen. So to turn around and be like undocumented citizens' children are not actually American citizens is a disgusting fucking talking point. But I guess it's like becoming more mainstream to make that argument all of a sudden. And we can get into that. Yeah. But ultimately, they, I believe, if like U.S. citizens as a whole used welfare with the amounts that like undocumented citizens could take advantage of it, I think our welfare state would be halved immediately or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the exact numbers. Like I have to look it up. But the ones that I do know exact numbers of is they always try to use this idea that like undocumented citizens are taking advantage of Medicaid. Okay. No, they're not. They can only take advantage of emergency Medicaid, which makes up 1% of the entire fucking which makes up only 1% of the entire healthcare expenditure in this country. Okay. And that emergency Medicaid pertains to poor people, not just undocumented immigrants. So we have no idea how much of that they're actually using, but it's less than 0.09% of our overall healthcare budget. So it's ridiculous to be like undocumented immigrants are fucking stealing Medicaid. It's fucking bullshit.
Yeah, I actually watched your Ancoder debate, and I remember that talking point from there. I have to say, though, you made a pretty fucking mad with saying you have been doing this longer for that I have been on this world.
Well,
she didn't even
yeah, she got really pissed off at that. Well, but partially I was mentioning that because I was like, dude, you gotta fucking like you gotta give me better talking points than just like all of these lies that you're spreading if you've been doing it for so long. That was my point.
Yeah, like when you say like the US has the biggest welfare state, what does that even mean? Like virtually every European country, if you go by citizen or per capita, has like a more generous welfare state than the US has.
Yeah, I mean, no, I know. It's so stupid. No, they you know how it is. They try to cherry pick different data points to make it seem as though they're like, to make it seem as though like the US welfare state is massive. Yeah, in totality it is, but that doesn't mean anything. Anyway. Hop 91, they're not lies, Hasan. Debate me. Stop circle jerking with some Euro know nothing. Okay, dog. Yeah, sure.
I fully take on that label though.
Euro know nothing. I love that. She did actually say some ageist shit to me first before the debate already started. Anyway, I already destroyed Destiny. Okay, Hop 91, sure. All right, let's keep going.
Without being denounced as a racist, Clinton got a standing ovation. As late as 2006, there were still liberals who cared about the economic effects of immigration, legal or illegal. Immigration reduces the wages of domestic workers who compete with immigrants, explained economist Paul Krugman in the New York Times. We'll need to reduce the inflow of low-skilled immigrants. Mainly that means better controls on illegal immigration. That same year, Senator Hillary...
Go on with this. Okay. I know you have some talking points on this, but I just got to close my door really quick, so you go
on. So I don't really get it. Like it seems like his talking point is like in 2006, liberals still had all their senses collectively, but now they completely went off the rail. So he has to go to a 2006 opinion piece that Paul Krugman wrote. While not talking about how much of our understanding of economics and immigration in relation to it has changed since then. And quite recently, Paul Krugman in June 2018, I think, wrote another opinion piece, not talking about as much as about the impact of immigration when it comes to economics, but he talked about how Donald Trump's immigration policy and rhetoric was completely unjustified. And also wrote that most of the research we know now of makes it appear like that illegal immigration doesn't suppress the wages of the workers a lot, although there are some disagreements. So he's kind of forced to frame it in this way, as the left used to be like this very sensible, reasonable thing, and now they all lost their shit. When in reality, just the left just goes with what the current research says.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, virtually every single economist agrees. In the end of the day, that immigration is a net benefit. Obviously, and the antidote to that conversation, where like, because there are certain elements like what Paul Krugman said in 2006 isn't completely untrue. When he says like illegal immigration does tend to depress wages, but that's literally the reason why our current understanding of immigration it centers around legal and illegal immigration. The entire reason why we no longer have a open borders, free travel approach to migrant workers is so that we could depress their wages and create a two-tiered labor system. So the antidote to that always is, well, fucking legalize them, bitch. That's literally what we're going after. That's literally what we want, is to give these citizens, give these people who are coming into this country to better themselves a chance to have a more like dignified life, that they can actually participate in the labor force.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, like the conclusion or the recommendation of people like Boras, who spend a lot of time researching and writing about this, is that that there is some short-term effect on the wages of local workers. That's just true. But that if we would be able to mitigate that with more redistributive policies, we would be able to grow our economy while minimizing the downsides of this immigration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not it's not like it always goes back to the same thing. It always goes back to the same argument. It's like, who is a greater threat to your sovereignty? The poor Mexican crossing the border, leaving his like friends and family and his culture behind just to better himself, just to find a better future for himself? Or is it the current economic structure that justifies oppression and and needs exploitation to continue? Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
Hillary Clinton voted for a fence on the Mexican border. So did Barack Obama and Chuck Schumer and 23 other Senate Democrats. Not anymore.
Well, so this is the lovely element here, is that, like, no, people still talk about securing the border. Like, people always still, to this day, the Democrats still talk about this shit. Like, their perspective, the common perspective of the Democratic Party, even though Tucker is, like, completely pointing to, like, something ridiculous now, he's going to say that they're, like, Democrats for open borders. But, like, as he's pointing out, like, Democrats still fucking believe in borders. You know what I mean? It's a self-defeating argument.
Yeah, I mean, he goes even... Yeah, okay, let's continue. I don't want to spoil anything.
20 years after Bill Clinton told Americans they had the right to be upset about illegal immigration, his wife scolded the country for enforcing border controls. So what changed? Not the economics of it. The law of supply and demand
I don't think so.
in effect.
You're the domestic expert.
I'm not an expert, but, like, who scolded the country? Like was
How
Hillary?
dare you enforce immigration policies?
Yeah, Democrats are fucking like militant in the way they care about our borders. They always they pay for fucking comprehensive spending packages for border security. They talk about increasing border security all the time. Chuck Schumer, as recently as like having a conversation about DACA immigrants, where Donald Trump was like, yeah, I'm not going to. I'm going to put these the immigration status of like 1 million plus immigrants in limbo who came here when they were like 4 years old to like 14 years old, who don't have any understanding of any other culture outside of like the American culture. Many of them don't even speak another language. I'm going to put their lives, these people who have trusted the government, I'm going to put their lives in fucking limbo, basically, just to justify my insanely expensive border. And Chuck Schumer even then was like, all right, it's fine. It's fine. Just like, please, we'll give you border control. Like, we'll give you more border control. They've never fucking had. They've unwaveringly supported stronger borders across the board.
Yeah.
So it's so silly. So I always joke about this, but it's like if they're gonna say like Democrats are socialists, or if they're gonna say like Democrats want open borders, well, why don't we fucking push for open borders? You know what I mean? Like we should be pushing for open borders, and we should be pushing for fucking socialism.
It's not a coincidence that as illegal immigration surged, wages for American workers stagnated. What changed?
This is the most disgusting argument, dude. This is the most disgusting argument. That part, for me at least. What changed?
Okay.
Let's see what he says.
Is that Democrats stopped caring about those workers, about the middle class, really.
Yeah, no, that's what it changed.
Okay.
The fact that we didn't, the fact that our middle class eradicated and is continuing to become much smaller as like the poorest subsect of American population is growing. And also a little bit of the upper middle class is growing as a consequence is that it has nothing to do with like Reagan era tax cuts and whatnot, and has everything to do with immigration. It's so fucking silly, dude.
Yeah, I love how he says like the economics hasn't changed, and what he's talking about is like the rule of supply and demand hasn't changed since then, as if there wasn't like a bunch of stuff that you would have to incorporate. But also like one thing, for instance, that has changed since then, which is why studies in the past from a few decades ago might have concluded that illegal immigration actually is a bad thing, is that the pool of labor for that illegal immigrants join, or immigrants as a whole, has changed since then. The high school dropout rate in the US has been lowering for decades now. So these positions are still there, but there are less and less American citizens to fill them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's silly to be like Democrats stopped caring, and it was all a consequence of undocumented like citizens coming in.
Yeah,
and
but what do they care about?
I mean, it's hilarious. First of all, like Democrats don't really care about the middle class. I do agree with Tucker Carlson on that point.
Yeah.
But Republicans definitely don't care about the fucking middle class, dude. Are you kidding me? It's so stupid. It's so stupid to like, and that's part of the reason why he doesn't mention Republicans and what their policy perspectives have been. Once it doesn't mention that like all of these fucking business owners are still Republican or paying into the RNC, and their mega donors all greatly benefit from undocumented citizens coming in and working their jobs. And the two-tiered labor system that we have in this country, and they want to keep it that way. They want to make sure that this is there is still an influx of illegal immigration happening into this country, so they can have like lower wages, so they can justify paying migrant workers like $1 a fucking hour or whatever they get paid. It's really stupid. You know, if you genuinely cared about the middle class, you would talk about redistribution. You talk about redistributing profits, or you talk about redistributing, profits, I guess.
Which kind of like leads to the question: what do the Tucker Carlson type people actually want? You know, if they're like so different from the modern day Republicans when it comes to immigration, what do they actually propose?
Yeah, no, I mean their proposition is almost nothing. Really, I mean, I've never heard Tucker Carlson talk about this outside of the framework of anti-immigration. Like for him, all of our problems will be solved if America stops browning out in the most simple terms, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like it pretty much boils down to we want less brown people in our country.
Yeah, I mean it's really silly. I mean, look, you understand this as a German person, right? Like, Germany benefited greatly from bringing in migrant workers into the country, specifically Turkish people, which I am a Turkish person, so I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're in like Germany. I would say is the engine that runs the European Union economy for the most part. And I'm using like really simple terms here. But without Turkish migrant workers, or without migrant workers in general, refueling the population, like Germany's economy wouldn't be as robust as it is to this day.
Yeah, exactly. Like Germany relies on that pretty much. Like as you said, it was the Turkish guest workers. Then when Romania and Bulgaria and Poland, all these other Eastern European states joined the EU, a lot of those workers came to Germany and started filling in those jobs. And while we're on the topic of that, let me just let me give you an example of what this like Tucker Carlson technique would look like in terms of like German policy. While we're talking about Turkish guest workers,
Yeah.
Like a lot of the like talking points in the far right or in the right wing of Germany, specifically after the with Erdogan now, and a majority of voting Turkish citizens living in Germany seem to like have an allegiance to him. Is look at these Turkish elements in our society. We took them in, we gave them work, and now they like kind of gravitate to this authoritarian, almost dictator, and don't integrate. That's the statement as they say it. But what they don't mention is then when those Turkish guest workers came, they came from the poorest areas, and Germany never intended like that to give these people like a staying perspective, but just like put them into ghettos, work for the economy, and then fuck off, go back. But they didn't go back, and because Germany didn't like spend any amount of effort to actually integrate them and incorporate them properly into society, that's why there's some division there. But that's like how like the demagoguery surrounding that works in Germany.
Yeah. No, I agree with that obviously wholeheartedly. And there's a lot of what do you call it? Oh, these guys are like, there's people just like fucking dropping bombs in here. Sorry, about like Donald Trump and whatever.
Oh, I love to hear one.
Yeah, no, they're copy pasting like, well, they're saying, wow, you have no facts in your arguments, man. Trump did put a bill to help DACA kids and their family members, and he also said they can stay, and he will help them get a path to citizenship if they gave him the funds for the wall. But the Democrats said, no, people don't care if you come here the legal way. Stop shouting this idiotic comments about we don't want more brown people. You guys are spewing bullshit. It's disgusting.
Wasn't it the other way around? Wasn't it that Chuck Schumer wanted to make the deal like we can do DACA if...
They held CHIP funding, the Children's Health Insurance Program funding. Like and this isn't the Democrats. Like like I said, they added expensive fucking porky and nonsensical things onto the budget just so they could fucking just so they could stop the DACA shit from ever happening. So this idea that like Donald Trump ever cared for the DACA immigrants, he might have personally cared for it. He might have personally cared about the DACA immigrants for like a brief moment. Is ridiculous and again revisionist. Like you lived through those times and look what happened. Do we have fucking a pathway to citizenship for DACA immigrants? Is their immigration status currently not held in fucking limbo? In the end of the day, Donald Trump has virtually all of the fucking power. These guys are like, Republicans hold both the House and the Senate and Donald Trump. If they wanted to pass fucking reform or protection towards extend the protection towards DACA immigrants, they could literally do that right now. They could do that tomorrow if they wanted to. You're so fucking stupid. Like how stupid you guys are. Honestly blows my mind, dude. Honestly blows my fucking mind. Whoever the original commenter was. I know it's copy pasta for a lot of you guys. But like whoever the original commenter was, it was like, you have no arguments. You're the most idiotic person I've ever fucking encountered. And I talk to idiots every single day. Oh my god.
Yeah, and regarding that comment, we were like talking about Tucker Carlson and the encoder types, and when Trump signaled that he wanted to do something about DACA,
they freaked out.
Lost their shit, yeah.
I did a whole video on it. I did a whole video on Tucker Carlson being like, it's really embarrassing to support you, Mr. President, because everyone always tells us that we suck hot shit because you're a dumb, idiotic baby. So if you're not going to do the racist things that you promised you were going to do for us, then why the fuck are we supporting you? That's literally Tucker Carlson's exact argument.
Yeah, and Ann Coulter tweeted something similar.
Yeah. But let's finish this. Let's ridiculous video.
Here's the answer in 4 simple facts. 1. According to a recent study from Yale, there are at least 22 million illegal immigrants living in the United States.
I love this. The one, you guys on the chat, you already know what this study is. Remember when that fucking kid came in, the troll came in, and he was like, yo, dude, it's really hard to figure out like how many illegals are actually voting because there's 22 million illegal immigrants. And then we looked at it, and then they made me fucking go down this rabbit hole where I was like, I had never heard this number before. So I looked at it for like 3 hours almost. And it was just like the one fucking study that 2 economists like two economists created, and against like years and years of census data, that just immediately was like, yeah, no, the census research is bullshit, so our research is better just by looking at output, just by focusing on output. It's so fucking stupid, dude.
Do you often have like people on your stream to debate, like Trump supporters and that kind of stuff?
No, there are definitely people that come in to like troll, and there are Trump supporters that come on every now and then. There are people who are like more conservative, and by that I mean like there are definitely like a lot of liberals and whatever in the chat. There are a lot of conservatives that even love Donald Trump that come in and watch me apparently because they think it's like funny. But sometimes, every now and then, sometimes every now and then you'll have someone who gets in and is just like saying ridiculous shit. And obviously I get caught up in it because I think it's usually a teachable moment. And I use it as a teachable moment for every single person. And also because like those are talking points. If I have never heard of those talking points, like it's good to hear. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, maybe I should do that on my live stream sometime.
Yeah, like it's good to hear like different talking points because like I said, it's like I had never heard the 22 million number like being promoted before in the way that I hear it now. And usually I try to be nice. Yeah, as Arya mentioned, I usually try to be nice and like listen to every single person unless it's like so fucking annoying and so idiotic, like whatever that dipshit was saying as far as like Donald Trump actually cared about DACA immigrants. Like, what the fuck do you mean, dude? Like Donald Trump has like he has whipping power over his fucking party. If he wanted to, he could absolutely do this. Like, you know what I mean? No, the Pac-Man combo is not going to happen right now. It's going to happen tomorrow. Apologies for everyone I duped by putting David Pac-Man's name in the title. Anyway.
Okay.
States. 2. Democrats plan to give all of them citizenship.
Again, like so fucking.
How you have to stop at like every 2 to 3 seconds.
Because it's so fucking stupid. Like this, one, he's already launched this entire argument off of a faulty premise, claiming that fucking Democrats. I love that argument. I love that argument so much. It's like these human beings are mindless drolls, right? They're mindless drones. They're all gonna vote for Democrats no matter what. It's so fucking stupid. It's so absolute garbage. It's so easy. Just literally all you need to do is don't be a fucking racist dipshit, okay? If you genuinely if you stopped trying to appeal to the white constituency, then you wouldn't actually, or if you genuinely cared about like policy perspectives or whatever, and this is my advice to the Republicans, then you would potentially get immigrants to vote for you. But because your campaigning is overtly racist, with dog whistling and white nativist immigration policies and this idea that like immigrants are coming to take your jobs and this vilification of minorities in general, exclusively in an effort to appeal to the white working constituency, then then of course they're gonna fucking vote Democrat. But this idea that like all of these immigrants are coming in and that like the Democratic Party wants them to come in so that we can brown out America and therefore automatically vote for Democrats across the board is so silly. And even his own perspective is incorrect because he mentioned Cubans, for example. Cubans notoriously vote right. Cubans are notoriously right-leaning, and they notoriously vote in high numbers for Republicans.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this like whole premise that Democrats want to, how they put it, like change the demographics to come to power. Like if there are that many illegal immigrants in the U.S., I think it's about 13% currently, and who contribute to the economy more than the average U.S. citizen. What would actually be the problem with giving these people citizenship? Like, is Tucker Carlson arguing like against democracy, or giving people who live in your country and pay taxes and contribute to your country like a voice in how politics is done? Or is it maybe about some other characteristic that these immigrants probably share? Who knows, really?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't make that assertion. I mean, I have no idea why Tucker Carlson constantly talks about false data. The other argument that I forgot to tell you, the other argument is the culture one, right? Like, usually when you drop the pretense that you care about immigration from the point of from an economist perspective, because immigrants, again, factually speaking, immigrants contribute more than they take, and they provide a net benefit to the economy. So once you drop that, right? Once you drop that notion, then you have to go into culture. And again, that is still a ridiculous perspective. Culturally, immigrants, or at least especially first-generation immigrants that are coming in the country, are usually more conservative, especially socially conservative. They're coming in from like socially conservative backgrounds, socially conservative countries. But then on top of that, it's just so stupid. I don't know what else to fuck. Oh, the cultural perspective that I was alluding to, that I was mentioning. By the third generation, immigrants are virtually indistinguishable. Like, third generation immigrants, no matter what their ethnic background is, are virtually indistinguishable as far as cultural assimilation goes. And that data is consistent with previous groups of immigrants that have come into this country. It's like Irish people becoming Americans, Polish people becoming Americans, Jewish people becoming Americans, like, and same with fucking Latino citizens as well. They all, especially after the third generation, are marrying other American citizens and viewing themselves as American citizens. And this idea that they are somehow like hold or harbor some form of resentment is so fucking stupid. And they will vote, and that Democrats have this like indecent like secret motive that they will always have a base of voters if we let immigrants into the country, is so fucking stupid.
Yeah, I mean, a different route that Republicans or Donald Trump could go, instead of denying a large part of your contributing population the right to vote, would be not calling them rapists.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, like, it's a numbers game, and for them, like, trying to appeal to like the racial anxieties of the white constituency is a better there is a better election strategy for the Republican Party than actually being like, oh, wait a minute, like, we should just run on our policies, which are across the board terrible for the overwhelming majority of Americans, which would fall under the category of the 99% rather than the 1%.
Yeah, listening to Donald Trump and this kind of rhetoric and how effective it almost like makes me feel bad for Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon, those folks who use the Southern strategy. It seems like they could have been just as overt about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like the Goldwater, like we've come a long way since the fucking Goldwater days, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, let's finish this. Like,
read the Democrats' 2016 party platform. 3. Studies show the overwhelming majority of first-time immigrant voters vote Democrat. 4.
I wonder why. Like, I really wonder why they do that, dude. Like, I wonder why they vote overwhelmingly for Democrats.
Yeah, it's like when Prager, they tweeted this, I think, last week when they said, like, oh my God, like, so many, such a large portion of journalists actually don't identify as Republican. Like, no shit. How come a group that is constantly demonized by the right in the U.S. doesn't itself count itself to the right? That's really surprising to me.
Yeah. All right.
The biggest landslide in American presidential history was only 17 million votes. Do the math. The payoff.
Again, 22 million illegal immigrants are currently in the country. Okay, none of them can vote. Every single study after study after study shows that, like, this voter fraud is essentially nonsense. Okay, it's completely fucking nonsense. But what Tucker's trying to say here inappropriately is that out of the 22 million illegal immigrants, by the way, a number that he fucking virtually pulled out of his ass, they're all voting, and they're all voting for Democrats in a country where it's not voter fraud that is actually a problem. It's fucking voter suppression that's a problem. In a country where only like a third to half of the country actually ends up voting. Like, the participation is so incredibly low in our country, and to turn around and fucking be like, it's actually voter fraud on top of that, and that, like, these 22 million number that I completely made up, they're all voting, and they're all voting for Democrats, is the most idiotic fucking argument you could ever launch against this.
Yeah, I mean, like contrast like Tucker Carlson cooking up this elaborate Democrat conspiracy that they will give those alleged 22 million people voting rights to stay in power. Contrast that with the actual legislation that is currently being pushed to disenfranchise voters, like the Native Americans in South Dakota, I think.
Yeah, North Dakota, yeah.
Yeah, North Dakota, yeah. Okay, let's finish this up, okay?
Yeah, sorry, I know it's
don't
late.
how
For
much more I can
Democrats,
take.
permanent electoral majority for the foreseeable future. In a word, power. That's the point, no matter what they tell you. American workers be damned. I'm Tucker Carlson.
Not a single point was made about whether, like, again, like I said, not a single point was made about whether Republican, like what Republican perspectives are, and like whether that's damaging to the American worker in general. It's just so fucking stupid. Again, it's just all complete idiotic nonsense that has no basis in reality. Anyway, Republicans are across the board all for cheap labor from immigrants, and that's precisely why they maintain their illegal citizenship status rather than provide them a pathway to citizenship, which is I think largely, I mean, I don't know what the latest results are, latest data is, but like that pathway to citizenship for immigration is something that the overwhelming majority of Americans agree with. Anyway, so okay, do you have any final words? I'm sorry that I made you
No problem, dude. I'm glad we made it through this. I think we really bonded over this. I feel like we were in a foxhole together. And when I just said let's finish up this video, it's not because it's getting late, but because it's like it's sometimes really hard to go through this. I'm sure you know as well.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any closing words. But like what makes this stuff so effective, like this video is 5 minutes, and look at the counter how long we have been streaming, even though we have been talking about some other stuff. How much effort you have to put in to just debunk those vacuous claims. It's the cards are kind of stacked against us.
No, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about a 5-minute video for approximately 2 hours, and that's usually how it goes because misinformation is very easy to spread, but countering that misinformation is very difficult. Using like actual empirical evidence and that sort of stuff is not necessarily the easiest thing. So, it's really frustrating, but this is the uphill battle that we must face here when dealing with the Republican Party, and a similar one that we also have to double down on when dealing with the Democrats, who are also demonizing leftist policies as well.
Yeah, let's hope we can motivate each other to keep going.
Yeah, but
keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the fucking awesome work that you do. As far as, like I said, as far as covering like far right messaging on your end, even all the way from Germany. So what's your background?
Likewise.
Do you mind like sharing anything? Like, what do you want to just like? You're such a mystery to us, Daniel. Give us some information.
I don't have an educational background in history. I just enjoy learning about it. As I said, I kind of stumbled into this. Like, I would have never guessed that the channel is so successful as it is right now. But I'll try to keep doing what I'm doing and hopefully not screw up. And maybe I can make a living of it in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, you have 72,000 subscribers, dude, with 18 videos. All of your videos are like over hundreds of thousands of views. You're fucking killing it, dude. I love the videos that you put out. I really do. They're awesome. The Was Hitler a Socialist one is one of my favorites. Another one that I love that I actually used on my stream earlier before I reached out to you was the Daughters of the Confederacy stuff that you were talking about. Guns in the Third Reich is a really good one. Another one that you did on Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson does not understand fascism. Like, for everyone here, like I said, I'm going to post this right here. This is Daniel's channel. It's called 3 Arrows. You guys should absolutely all go and subscribe to it. He makes like insanely informative 20-minute comprehensive breakdowns on all of these issues.
Yeah, everything you said, I can just give back. Thank you very much for what you do, and thank you very much. Even though I was kind of shy at first, and thank you to all the lovely people on your stream watching.
Yeah, no, you killed it, dude. You fucking crushed it. You're great. You're great live. I look forward to you starting your own and like doing your own live Twitch channel as well. Anyway, okay, so give us your quick plugs on top of that, whatever you want to do, and then I'm going to continue and finally go play some historically accurate Red Dead Redemption.
Okay, folks. Yeah, as you said, you can catch me on my YouTube channel, 3 Arrows. You can catch me on Twitter, 3 Arrows. You can catch me on Instagram as Dan Arrows, or I'm also on Twitch, 3 as a number arrows. Come hang sometime. And hopefully until the next time when I appear on the stream.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be bringing you in again. Don't worry. This was great. Thank you so much, brother.
I'm excited. Thank you as well. See ya.
All right. Peace.